Good morning, ma'am.
Okay. Now screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So last time we have studied the topic from fish toxicology, and that fish toxicology, that topic is included in paper number 12th and unit 4th, and the 2 points are included in that. One is pesticide effect and second one, that is aquaculture drugs. So um, just I'm going to share that what we have studied last time, in that what is toxicology, in that definition of toxicology. Then toxic agents means the substances, poisonous substances which acts on the body of animals and causes various dangerous effects. And these toxic agents may be chemical, physical, these are also biological agents. Then these are organic and inorganic toxins, then systemic toxins and organ toxins. So you know this systemic toxin that affect the entire body, and organ toxin that affect on a specific organ or specific tissue. Okay, so that that specific organ is called as a target organ, and after the effect of that particular toxin on that particular organ, there will be a damage takes place, damage of that particular organ takes place. For example, in that central nervous system, kidneys and hematopoietic system. So there are several body tissues or cells which are present in the body. These are affected by these toxic agents. Then there are different factors which determines the adverse effects, and in that intrinsic toxicity, then particular dose of that toxicant, then exposure conditions, then route of exposure, then frequency and duration of exposure, then mixed exposure and environmental circumstances by which way the toxic agents are entered into the body that causes the adverse effects. Another one, that is there are different routes by which the toxic agents entered into the body: oral exposure, then inhalation, then dermal exposure, as well as parenteral exposure. Parenteral. So another one, that is when these toxic agents are entered into the human body as well as the animal body, it causes the severe effect. In that there are acute toxicity, subchronic toxicity takes place, carcinogenicity, developmental toxicity, and genetic toxicity takes place. So these are the effects caused by the toxic agents when they are entered into the body. Okay, so last time we have studied up to that point, and today I'm going to start exactly the fish toxicology. In that we have from this name, fish toxicology or aquatic toxicology, we thought that the toxic agents, these are entered into the aquatic region, these are entered into the water and then affect on the aquatic organism, aquatic animals also. And when these animals or aquatic animals, for example fish, when these are consumed by the fish, what will happen? The toxic agents which are acted on the body of that fish These act on the body of fish means cells of the body of fish, in that various organs are affected, muscular structure of muscle part of that fish, uh, that is also affected, and after the consuming that type of fish, the various effects, adverse effects are observed in the body of human being also. So, you know, the fisheries and the aquatic resources. Aquatic resources are ponds, rivers, these are streams, seas, and the oceans. And that aquatic resources supply the long-term benefits to human being. And these benefits are financial benefits, and that provide the employment. That provides the employment, they provide the profit, as well as the money is also saved when they get employment, that person get money and they save that money. So there are long-term benefits of that aquatic resources. So that as there are benefits, there are also occupational hazards are also there, and safety concerns in aquaculture industry. So that toxicology, aquatic toxicology, it is the study of effect of environmental pollutants on aquatic organisms. These environmental pollutants act on the aquatic organisms, and in that the pesticides, the pesticide effect of pesticides, in that most of the time these pesticides, these are used by farmers in their farm, and these pesticides enter into the environmental region through water. These are pores, or they contaminate the another water bodies also, and when the human being as well as the organisms, they come into contact with that insecticides, they causes the harmful effects. So that aquatic toxicology, in that the environmental pollutants, effect of that environmental pollutants on aquatic organisms, and these environmental pollutants, in that especially the insecticides are there, and that act on the health of fish and another organisms. So that pesticides that have been found to be a highly toxic, not only to fish but also to other organisms which constitute the food chain. You know, in environment, the food chain is there, food web is also there, many food chain, they interact with each other and form the food web also. So in that environment, all these animals interacted with each other. So when these pesticides or toxic agents entered into the environment, these are directly act on the body of that animal as well as the human being. So toxic effects are observed. Okay. So in that, the applications of insecticides that diminish the quantity and quality of the food production. So the pesticides, you know, the pesticides in general, these are used extensively in agricultural practices, in forestry also, in public health, and in veterinary practices also. These pesticides are used, and these pesticides are categorized according to their target use. These are categorized according to their target use. So the three major pesticides and herbicides and insecticides, herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides are there. These are the three main pesticides. In that, herbicides, these are used for the control of weeds. Then insecticides, these are used for the control of insects. And fungicides, these are used for the mitotic control. For the fungal control, these fungicides are used. So these are the three major types of pesticides. But the more acute toxicity is because of the insecticides. More acute toxicity is because of the insecticides. So that is insecticide toxicity. And the fishes, these are the important sources of proteins as well as lipids for the human being. And insecticides, these are the chemicals used to control insects by killing and preventing them to form unwanted behavior, that is destructive behavior. Most of the time these insecticides are used to kill the insects, or they as they destruct various crops also. And it causes the contamination of surface waters. And the effects, because of that contamination, the ill effects are seen on the growth as well as survival as well as reproduction in aquatic animals. Okay, so different insecticides, these are present in many types of wastewater. And there are various studies have found them to be toxic to aquatic organisms, especially the fish species. Okay, so the application of insecticides used for the control a wide variety of insectivorous as well as the herbaceous pest, and which would diminish the quantity and quality of the food production. Okay, so in short, the application of insecticides that diminish the quantity and quality of the food production. Okay, so the insecticides, these are threatening the long-term survival of major ecosystems, and that long-term threatening is by the destruction of the ecological relationship totally in environment. That relationship, we have already studied that many food chains are there, and these are combined with each other and form a food web. So in environment, all these animals are interacted with each other. So the disruption of ecological relationship between organisms, as well as there is also a loss of biodiversity. There is also a loss of biodiversity takes place. And there are major chemical groups of insecticides, and these are usually applied on the crops. These are organophosphates, then carbamate, then chlorinated hydrocarbon, and pyrethroids and nicotinoids. Okay, so these are the major chemical group of insecticides, and these insecticides are usually applied on the crops, usually applied for the control of various insects. So these insecticides that lead to the decrease the rate of growth, reproductive behavior, as well as many reproductive disorders are observed because of that. And in most of the cases, the spinal deformities are formed. Many histopathological changes are also seen in the gills as well as liver, then hemopoietic tissues. And this hemopoietic tissue means, that is spleen, that is the hematopoietic tissue. And the head of kidney also, then renal tubules are also affected, and endocrine tissues as well as brain. Then it also affects on neurological as well as the behavioral disorders, and in most of the cases the genetic defects are observed. So that adverse effects are seen, or these organs are affected because of the exposure to insecticide, and hence these pollutants such as insecticides may significantly damage the certain physiological as well as the biochemical processes, and that cause the impairment of the health status of the fishes. So when the environment is affected, when the water is affected, that time it affects on the organisms as well as animals which are present in that particular environment. Organisms which are present in environmental region, in air as well as in a water also. So sometimes that may occur after a long period of time. As we have studied in our first lecture, that we know what is acute toxicity. When the pollutants or toxicants, these affect on the body and the effects are seen immediately, that is called as acute toxicity. Okay. Then the effects, if these are seen after 24 hours, after many days, sometimes after many years also, that may be a chronic toxicity. So in that, after a long period of time, if that particular animals are exposed to that particular polluted environment or contaminated environment, then the immune suppression takes place. The immunity is suppressed. Then there is a low metabolic processes and damage to gills as well as the epithelial region is also disturbed. Okay, so the fisheries in fisheries and the specific aquatic resources. You know, aquatic resources, these are ponds, rivers, streams, oceans, seas, and these are supplying people with a long-term benefits, and that these benefits can be direct financial as well as they provide the employment. You know this. So in that also, if the contamination of water with insecticides is mainly due to the intensive agriculture combined with surface runoff and the surface drainage, and usually within a few weeks after a application. Okay, so these application of insecticides, these are used for the control of variety of insectivorous as well as herbaceous pests, and that that diminish the quality and quantity of food production. So in that also, the fishes, these are particularly sensitive to environmental contamination of the water. Hence, these pollutants such as insecticides that may affect significantly certain physiological and biochemical process, and that different kinds of insecticides can cause the serious impairment and health status of fishes. This is the introductory part of the aquatic toxicology. How it affects, which are the pesticides, how these are entered into the environment as well as in the water, and how these pesticides as well as insecticides is act on the body of a fish. Okay, so next point is impact of water pollutants on health of fish. So am I audible? Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next point, impact of water pollution on the health of fish, and that water pollution, it is the result of urbanization as well as the industrialization. And because of that industrialization process, urbanization, the water pollution is caused. The concern that pollution that may influence the health status of the fish stocks, and that increased over the last 20 years also. And initial attention actually was paid to the epidermal diseases, including fin rot in the fish, then protozoan diseases in mollusks, and in heavily polluted areas. But in general, the diseases in fish as well as in shellfishes also are very localized, but there is a concern among the scientists that the certain cancers, especially liver tumors occurring in the fish inhabiting the polluted estuarine and the coastal waters. And these are related to the release of that chemicals. And for example, these chemicals are hydrocarbons, then pesticides and heavy metals also. So these are entered into that particular watery environment, and this can affect on the body of fish. So another one, that is pesticide toxicity in fish. In that, the pesticides, these are the substances, and these are used to control the organisms, including insects as well as the plant diseases. Then the increased human population with rapid industrialization induce the problem of disposal of wastewater. So pesticide, use of that pesticide in agricultural field to control the pest is extremely toxic to non-target organisms. Sometimes the non-target organisms are affected because of the use of that pesticides, like fish. So, you know, the pesticides as well as insecticides, these are used to control the insects as well as the harmful organisms. But because of the pollution which is caused by these pesticides as well as insecticides, it causes the toxic effects on the non-target organism. That fish is a non-target organism, and it is affected because of this pesticide. So this pesticide use of that pesticide or pesticide usage in agricultural fields to control the pest, it is extremely toxic to non-target organisms like fish and affect the fish health through the impairment of the metabolism. So metabolism is impaired, and sometimes the fish mortality also takes place. Death of fish takes place. So increased human population with rapid industrialization induce the problem of disposal of that wastewater. So the domestic waste and the untreated or partially treated industrial effluents. Okay, so domestic waste along with partially or untreated industrial effluents, supplemented with pollutants like heavy metals. So heavy metals are also added into that, and pesticides and many organic compounds have greatly contributed to the massive death of the aquatic ecosystem. Okay, so since that pesticides present in the environment with other similar organophosphate compounds, and that may induce the lethal or sub-lethal effect. Okay, so lethal effect, you know, it is very damageable. Sometimes the death of that animal takes place. That is the lethal effect. So in environment, when they affect through environment, when they affect on the body of that fish, the lethal effects are seen. Okay, so next, that is the naturally occurring pesticides. These have been used for many countries, but the widespread production and use of modern synthetic pesticides did not begin until 1940. Okay, so today that pesticides are the big business, and over billions of pounds of pesticides. These are used in United States, okay, per year. So that pesticide is one of the biggest business, and these are pesticides. These are categorized according to their target use to many groups such as insecticides, fungicides, then herbicides, then rodenticides, nematicides, acaricides, and molluscicides. Okay, so these act on that specific organisms. So the three major pesticides, you know this, we have already studied in previous slide, that herbicides, then insecticides and fungicides for use of control of the weed, then control of the insects, as well as for the control of fungi, as well as the mycotic control. So nematicides are the pesticides. These are also used to control the soil, leaf, and stem dwelling nematodes. Okay, so this stem dwelling nematodes, these are the roundworms. And acaricides is a pesticides that is used to control the ticks as well as the mites. Okay, so the capacity of that pesticides to harm the fish as well as the aquatic animals, it is largely a function of its toxicity. Okay, so exposure time, then dose rate, then persistence in the environment. Persistence in the environment means how much time these are remain in the environment. Then lethal dose, that is the amount of the pesticides necessary to cause the death. Okay, means we know that there is a LC50, LD50 value, lethal dose, lethal concentration of that particular pesticide. So lethal dose, it is the amount of pesticide necessary to cause the death, because not all animals of the species die at the same dose. So it requires a particular dose to control that or to death of the 50% organism. When the particular dose is given to that organism and the 50% of the population dies, then that concentration or that dose is called as a LC50 or LD50, means lethal concentration or lethal dose of that particular pesticide. Okay, so amount that lethal dose is amount of pesticide necessary to cause the death, because not all animals of the species die at the same dose. And the standard toxicity dose measurement, standard toxicity dose measurement is called as a lethal concentration 50, means LC50. And that concentration is most of the times used by the people to control that particular pest. Okay, so concentration of the pesticide that kills the 50% of test population of fish within a set period of time is usually determined after the 24 to 96 hours. Okay, so hazard ratings ranging from the minimal to super toxic, and LC50s for commonly used insecticides and fungicides. Okay, so next, that is the exposure of fish and the other aquatic animals to pesticides depends upon the bioavailability, that is biological availability. And that bioavailability, that refers to the amount of pesticides in environment available to fish and wildlife. Some pesticides are rapidly break down after the application. After application of the insecticide, most of the pesticides, these are rapidly break down. Okay, some bind tightly to the soil particles. Okay, and some suspended in water columns. Okay, some of the pesticides, these are suspended in the water column or the stream, as well as some of the pesticide remains at the bottom. Okay, so thereby reducing their availability. Most of the times that exposure of that particular fish or aquatic organism hmm, is exposure is reduced, and because of that most of the pesticides are degraded. Most of the pesticides are remain as it is at the bottom, some found in a water column also because of that. Some are quickly diluted in the water. Some of the pesticides, these are quickly diluted or rapidly volatilized into the air. Okay, sometimes these, because of their volatility, they enter into the air, and they are less available to the aquatic life. Okay, these are less available to aquatic life. So another important term is there, that is biomagnification. Okay, biomagnification, in that it is the accumulation of pesticides. Biomagnification, it is the accumulation of the pesticides at each successive level of the food chain. Okay, so at successive at a particular, in a food chain there are particular levels. So at each level there is a accumulation of that pesticide takes place. So that accumulation at a successive level is called as a biomagnification, and some pesticides build up in the food chain. For example, if the pesticide is present in a small amount in water, and it can be absorbed by water plants, which are in turn eaten by the insects. Okay, which are in turn eaten by the insects, that become contaminated. So at each step in food chain, in the concentration of pesticide is increases or it is decreases. So fish that can pass these poisons to human, as the human being feed on the fishes. So persistence of pesticides refers to the length of time that pesticide remains in the environment. Okay, so that depends on how quickly it breaks down, how quickly it degrades, which is largely a function of chemical composition and the environmental conditions also. Okay, so that persistence means how much time these pesticides remain in the environment. That persistence is usually expressed as a half-life of that pesticides. Okay, persistence is usually expressed as a half-life. Okay, so sometimes these pesticides can be degraded, and that is called as a photo decomposition process. By this process, by photo decomposition process, these pesticides are degraded. High air or high temperature of water, because of that also the pesticides are degraded. That is called as a thermal degradation. Okay, then sometimes the moisture conditions as well as the biological action, that time also the pesticides are degraded. That is called as a microbial decay process. And the soil conditions means the pH of soil. That is also because of also the pesticides are degraded. So persistence means that is long-standing mechanism that persistence of pesticide break down slowly and may more available to the aquatic organisms. So when they are entered, it depends on that particular pesticide. So when these are entered into the environment in aquatic as well as in outside environment also, the each of the pesticide have a different degrading time, and so that some of the pesticides that may be more available to the aquatic animals, if these are remain as it is in an environment for long time, then these are more available to the aquatic animals. Okay, so sometimes we know that because of that pesticides, there are many adverse effects are seen in the environment as well as in aquatic animals. But these pesticides also have many advantages also. They can protect the various forests, then farm crop losses, as well as they can aid more efficient food production, as there is a insect, because of that insecticides, the damage of the damage because of that insects is reduced, and so that there will be a more efficient food production. They are also used to slow the spread of destructive forest insects. Because of that, the destructive forest insect spread becomes slow. And in that specifically gyps moth. And that gyps moth, it is used to establish the as well as maintain the lawns and many recreational areas, and controlling many insect-borne diseases also, such as malaria, encephalitis, bubonic plague. So by this way, there are also advantages, but they causes the disadvantages also. Like advantages, there are more disadvantages are also there. And these disadvantages of pesticides, including their toxicity to some human as well as animals as well as useful plants, and the persistence means long life and some of these chemicals in the environment. So pesticide use is one of many factors contributing the decline of fish and other aquatic species also. So these pesticides are capable of killing the fishes in that salmon and other aquatic life directly and within a short period of time. Some of the chemicals or these organic as well as inorganic pesticides, they affect by giving after the action of that acute dose, and within a short period of time the death of that fishes takes place. Sometimes the long-term exposure to certain pesticides can alter the swimming ability of that fish, which in turn can reduce the ability of feeding, then to avoid predators, then define in that defined territory and maintain the position in a aquatic system. Sometimes the indirect effects of that pesticides are seen, and these are interfere the fish with their food supply, and they alter the aquatic habits, then reduces the growth, then probability of the survival also of the fish. So it is reported that the chronic toxicity of the fish that may ultimately cause the death, and it causes the elimination of the species. That sometimes that chronic toxicity causes the elimination of that particular species or individual over the long period of time. Okay, so though the host effects such as induced sterility, it induces the sterility, also interfere within the organism, then defense mechanism is also reduced, then loss of appetite, it causes the blindness, then hyper excitability is also there, and other weaknesses and reduction in fertility. So these are the various disadvantages of that pesticides. Okay. Then next point is routes of pesticides, fish exposure. Then by which different routes the fishes are exposed to that pesticides. That is the routes of pesticides, fish exposure. In that, the fish and the aquatic animals, these are exposed to the pesticides in three primary ways. In that, first one is dermal, second one is direct absorption to the skin by swimming in pesticide. And then the pesticide contaminated water. Okay, then inhalation by direct uptake of pesticides through the gills during respiration orally by drinking pesticides, contaminated water, as well as feeding on a pesticide contaminated prey. Okay, then there are some secondary causes, and that cause the exposure of fish and other aquatic animals to pesticides, and that leads to a toxicity. Okay, so the information about the possible pesticides which are affected on the fish and other aquatic life depend upon the various atoms, like type of pesticide product, then use rate, then weather condition, then aquatic species involved, then extent of problem, then location, size of pond or lake which is affected. So the that particular table that shows the acute toxicity of the fish, of some pesticides, and there are also different fish species, in that rainbow trout, then catfish, feather, uh, then rainbow trout, channel catfish, Labiorhita. So these are katla, these are the different fish. And there are also different, that table shows the different pesticides also, in that DDT, then Acton, acephate, and these are different pesticides, methyl parathion, like this. And the duration of exposure is also there. How much hours? 96 hours. And how much dose is there? So in that dose particular vein, these pesticides affect on the fish species, and in that particular hours, the effect of that pesticides are seen on the body as well as muscles of fish, and the it causes the adverse effect. And in that condition, then these fishes are cached, and if these are consumed by the human being also, as well as any other animal, carnivorous animal also, that time the effect of pesticide, these pesticides act on the body of that particular animal also, and it causes the adverse effect on the body of that particular animal. Okay, so how much time is remaining? Hello, students. Time is over.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
हॅलो पाच मिनिट आहेत अजून 4.
Okay. Hmm. That following figures shows the exposure of fish to the environmental pollutants in clouding pesticides. Okay. You can see this picture. In that the death of fishes is caused because of the effect of pesticides. And these fishes are in contaminated water, and that contamination is because of the use of various pesticides. Okay, and here is in that fourth figure, the industrial effluents. These are also entered or poured into the water bodies. So obviously that fishes which are present in that particular water body, these are affected by the pesticides as well as various metals, as well as various another contaminants, and is effect on the body of fish. And you can see that water in this figure, the water is totally turbid, and this is because of the insecticides as well as pesticides. And in last figure, the death of many fishes takes place because of that, because of the effect of that pesticides. Sometimes the dose is very acute and immediate death takes place, and sometimes the dose is small but continuous exposure of that pesticides on that uh, fishes, that also causes the legal effects in that fish. Next point is integrated pest management. And I think we will study from here next time. Okay, from this integrated pest management, I will continue from this integrated pest management in the next lecture. Okay, students.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any difficulty? Any difficulty?